When a government bans not weapons, not ships, but a simple human right to look at a frightened child and say, "You're not alone anymore," it will always be served as security, stamped interspecies stability, filed as prevention of cultural assimilation, wrapped in cold phrases that do not carry the sound of children crying in station corridors. Directive Number 77 GCC on the guardianship of homeless alien miners appeared after the Third Border War, when the galaxy was tired of counting coffins and began counting risks instead. The war had left behind ruins, drift fields of metal, empty domes, and thousands of young lives that did not fit neatly into any passport system. Some species had lost registries entirely. Some had lost worlds. Humans, as they often did, stepped forward too fast and too openly. They took evacuees into their habitats. They offered medics, oxygen, warm rooms. And when a child had no one, humans did what they always did on their own planet. They tried to make the child family. That is where the argument began. At advisory tables in the center, delegates talked about dependence, about soft colonization, about hidden influence through care. They said humans were too generous, and generosity at the scale of politics is never free. "You are buying loyalty," the bloc said. "We are saving children," humans answered. "You are shaping reliance," the blocs insisted. "We are shaping life," humans repeated. Directive 77 GCC passed by majority vote. Its text was polished, lawyer-perfect, sterile as vacuum. Human citizens were forbidden from adopting alien minors found outside their native jurisdiction. All custody objects were to be delivered to specialized centers under the supervision of the Galactic Custody Commission. Temporary placement, the directive promised, until repatriation, or species-appropriate allocation. Temporary turned out to be a word that can stretch for years. Centers turned out to be places sunlight rarely visits. And supervision turned out to be a line in a report. Captain Marco Rudansky did not learn about the directive from the news. He learned about it from an order that arrived in the middle of a routine route, while his freighter, the Swallow, carried medicine, filters, and spare parts to stations that survived mostly out of habit. The order was simple: dock at Station Gerda 9, pick up cargo marked K Custody, deliver to Lyra 6. Signature, Logistics Department. Seal, State. Marco read it twice like he always did. He hated surprises hidden inside dry text. When he saw the prefix NP, minors, his mouth went dry. "Do we have child cargo?" asked senior mechanic Lada Chorna, leaning over his shoulder. "We do," Marco said. "Temporary transport. Commission center." Lada stared at him like he had suggested they move explosives through the bunks. "I thought after the directive humans weren't allowed to touch that." "We're not adopting," Marco said, and hated how the words tasted. "We're delivering." Lada exhaled sharply, then swore under her breath, and went back to the engine room, as if speed could drown conscience. The Swallow adjusted course. Gerda 9 glowed on the nav as a weak, flickering dot. Marco told himself this was logistics. He told himself he was only a captain. He told himself there were rules for a reason. And somewhere, very quietly, the part of him that still remembered the war answered, "Sometimes rules exist to make it easier to look away." Gerda 9 did not greet them with docking lights. From afar, the station looked like a dead insect pinned to the dark. One ring cracked, one spine bent, antennae broken into jagged stubs. Its beacon pulsed irregularly, like a heartbeat with long pauses. Marco tried all channels. "Gerda 9, this is Freighter Swallow requesting docking clearance." Silence. He tried again. He sent the formal code. He sent the emergency code. He heard only static, the kind that makes your skin itch. Lada joined him on the bridge, grease on her knuckles, jaw tight. "Maybe they're out," she said, but her eyes said she knew better. Marco took the Swallow closer, careful as if approaching a wounded animal. The station's shadow swallowed starlight. A thin smear of debris orbited it, slow and indifferent. Panels, struts, a lost toolbox, something that might once have been a child's toy. "Radiation?" Lada asked. "Low," Marco said, "but the internal power grid, it's not stable." He found the docking collar with manual optics. The collar was intact, barely, The maglocks looked like they had been used recently. "Someone was here," he said. They made the approach without permission. The Swallow's clamps kissed metal. The hull shuddered, as if the station exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Marco sealed his suit, took a light, a medkit, a cutter. Lotta followed with a wrench that looked less like a tool and more like a decision. They crossed the airlock. The station corridor was cold enough to make breath ghost through filters. Emergency strips painted everything in a sick red. The floor was littered with frost crystals and thin, dried stains that Marco refused to name. A smell hung in the air. Ozone, old plastic, something sour. "Life signs?" Lotta whispered. Marco checked the scanner. "Intermittent," he said. "Weak. Mostly down the service shaft." They moved, boots loud in the silence. A door panel had been forced open. Behind it, a storage bay had been converted into something else. They saw the capsules first. 6 translucent pods stood in a line like an exhibit, each with a faint glow at its base. Tubes ran from them into portable canisters. On the floor lay discarded restraints. Against the wall sat an armed guard in commission gray, helmet off, eyes half open, breathing shallow. He raised his hand, shaking. "Do not approach," he rasped. Lotta's wrench lifted slightly. Marco stepped forward, palms out. "Captain Marco Rudansky. This is a civilian vessel. What happened here?" The guard swallowed. "Station failure. Protocol enacted. Custody objects secured for transport." "Transport where?" Marco asked, though he already knew. "Lyra 6, the guard whispered. "Then center." Marco looked at the capsules. Through one lid, he saw a small shape curled tight, skin the color of twilight. Another capsule held something almost transparent, like a child made of fog. In a third, a narrow face pressed to the inner glass, eyes open, watching. The guard's voice cracked. "Don't open them. It's against regulation." "Regulation," Lotta repeated, soft and sharp like a knife. Marco's fingers hovered near the release. "Are they alive?" "All alive," the guard said. "Sedated. Safer." Marco listened, and somewhere beyond the hum of machinery, he heard a faint sound that wasn't the station. A small, irregular tapping. A rhythm, like someone knocking from inside the universe's thickest wall. He placed his hand on the nearest capsule. From within, tiny fingers pressed back. When Marco returned to the cargo module of the Swallow, the words, "Child Cargo," no longer felt like paperwork. The 6 capsules were now on his ship, because leaving them on Gerda 9 was leaving them to die. The guard, restrained and medicated, lay strapped in a bunk, more terrified of his superiors than of the strangers who had saved his life. And then they found 3 more. No capsules, no seals. 3 small bodies wrapped in blankets near the station's auxiliary air recycler. Someone had tried to keep them warm with a portable heater that had long since died. The youngest clutched an empty oxygen bulb like it was a toy. One child had short horns, the kind that looked too heavy for a head that small. The third's eyes were so large Marco felt his chest ache. Lotta cursed, then knelt, checking pulses with hands that shook only once, then steadied. "They're alive," she said. "Barely." Marco turned to the comm. He dialed the commission code. "Freighter Swallow reporting. Station Gerda 9 is in critical condition. 9 alien miners found on site. Need instructions." The reply came in a voice that sounded like every corridor in every office. Polite, final, human-sounding, but not human. "Thank you for your report. Remain on your assigned route. All custody objects must be delivered to Lyra 6. Any deviation from protocol will be recorded as obstruction and theft of commission property." Marco stared at the display. Property. He ended the call. Leda looked up. "They said property, didn't they?" "They did," Marco answered. The horned child stirred, eyes fluttering open, his gaze fixed on Marco's uniform patch, then on the capsule line, then on the airlock door, as if memorizing exits. The youngest, the one with the oxygen bulb, reached toward the capsule glass like she had been on Gerda 9 all along, like she was asking, "Why do they get a pod, and I don't?" Marco felt something tighten in his throat. They carried the 3 into the med bay. The ship's translator unit, A worn little device Marco had used during the war beeped uncertainly as it tried to map unfamiliar phonemes. When the children could sit, when they had swallowed warm broth in careful sips, Marco returned to the restrained guard. The guard opened one eye, saw Marco, and flinched. "This is a violation," he rasped. "You don't understand what you're doing." "Maybe," Marco said, "but I understand what you are doing. You put children in capsules and call it procedure." The guard's lips trembled. "If the commission finds out—" "They will," Marco said. "Then all of us will have to answer. But on my ship, children don't die because a protocol says they're inconvenient." Lada, leaning in the doorway, said quietly, "Lie still. You're not a hero today." The guard shut his eyes as if that hurt more than restraints. Marco walked back to the cargo bay. The child inside the third capsule still watched him. Not begging, not crying, just watching. Like a person who has learned that adults decide everything, and the only power left is to remember. Marco placed his palm against the glass again. Tiny fingers answered, and in that simple contact, he understood. If he delivered them to Lyra 6, the story would end in a report. If he didn't, the story would begin in a crime. The latch clicked, and the nearest capsule's transparent lid lifted with a sigh. Cold vapor spilled out and crawled across the floor like a living thing. Marco held the child's shoulders as gently as he could. His gloves were warm, his voice softer than the ship's hum. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe." The child jerked back. She did not scream. She did not bite. She only trembled so hard her teeth clicked, eyes fixed on his hands as if hands were what hurt. Her skin was blue-toned, not the bright blue of fiction, but the deep shade of dusk over water. Fine markings traced her collarbone like ink. Her hair, if it was hair, fell in thin, dark strands that stuck to her cheeks from condensation. The translator beeped, tried a phrase, failed, then produced a broken sound. The girl looked at the device. She lifted a hand, touched it lightly, like testing whether it was a trap. "Sa," the translator stuttered. "Lissa." The girl nodded once. A tiny, fierce nod. Marco repeated it. "Lissa." At the sound, her eyes softened for a second, just long enough for Marco to feel relief, then shame for how desperate he was to earn trust from a child he was about to endanger with his choices. They opened another capsule. A boy with short horns, skin the color of dry clay, blinked against the light. He made a sound the translator rendered as "round," close enough, Marco decided, to be a name. The third capsule held the translucent child. When the lid rose, it was like watching mist learn to be a person. The child's outline shimmered. Their eyes, however, were solid, deep, attentive, and older than they should have been. The translator tried. "Si." "E," it produced. "Sci." She did not nod or shake their head. She simply watched, as if listening to the ship's bones. One by one, they freed the remaining 3 from capsules. The children were quiet, like people who had learned that noise brings punishment. 2 had bruises in places where restraints had bitten. 1 had a small scar above the ear, too clean to be an accident. Lada clenched her jaw so hard Marco heard teeth grind. The 3 blanket children from the station woke more slowly. When the oldest could speak, he tried to tell Marco their real names, but the translator tripped. "We... from Nest," the device finally managed, clumsy. "Our names. Like Sky. You can't." Marco knelt so he was eye level because standing made him feel like an officer again, and he hated being that. "Then I'll name you the way I can," he said. "If you don't mind." He looked at them. The oldest, quiet and steady. The middle one, restless. The youngest, curious even through fear. He chose simple call signs, not to claim them, but to stop saying, "object." "Sky," he said to the oldest. The child's eyes flickered, understanding maybe the shape of the word. "Wind," to the middle. "And you?" Marco smiled gently at the smallest, who was already touching buttons she shouldn't. "You're Spark." The translator beeped and for once did not argue. Spark, Iskra in Marco's mother tongue, grinned for half a heartbeat, then hid it as if smiles were illegal. Marco went back to the cargo bay and stared at the 6 empty capsules. They looked harmless now, like clean glass shells, but he could still feel the fingers on the inside. Lotta came up behind him. "If we take them to Lyra 6, we hand them over and we sleep again," she said. "If we don't, we become targets." Marco swallowed. "I don't think I can sleep either way." Lotta's voice dropped. "Where do you want to go, Captain?" Marco looked at the nav and decided to break the rule. The first hours after freeing the capsules were not heroic. They were messy, human, exhausting. The children did not trust food. They sniffed it, touched it, hid it. Spark stole 2 protein bars and a screwdriver and tried to trade them for a blanket. Round watched everyone's hands as if hands were weapons. When Lotta reached for a med patch, Round flinched so hard he hit the wall. Lissa refused to be alone. She hovered near Marco like a shadow, not clinging, not touching, just staying close enough to see his face if something changed. She barely spoke at all. They sat, palms flat on the floor, eyes unfocused, like someone listening to a language made of vibrations. The Swallow's translator struggled, but it did its best. It rendered smells as adjectives. It turned colors into verbs. Sometimes it gave nonsense. Sometimes it delivered a sentence so precise it made Marco's stomach twist. Lotta worked like she always did, fixing, stabilizing, making the ship a safer place because she knew how helpless it felt to be at the mercy of broken systems. Marco did paperwork because even rebellion needs records. He logged medical notes, fuel states, legal risk. He wrote the word child instead of object every time, as if typing could be defiance. At the 5th hour, the commission called again. The display showed a seal, then a face, a woman in gray, hair pulled tight, eyes cold with practiced certainty. "Freighter Swallow," she said, "you have deviated from assigned route and performed unauthorized docking with Station Gerda 9. You are in possession of Commission custody objects. Return to route immediately." Marco didn't blink. Gerda 9 was failing. There were 3 miners outside capsules. Your protocol would have left them. "The station was under Commission jurisdiction," she said. "Your intervention is recorded as obstruction." "Call it what you want," Marco replied. "They're alive because we were there." The woman's gaze sharpened. "You will comply." Lotta leaned close to Marco, murmuring, "They're tracking our signature now. If we keep talking, they get more vectors." Marco ended the call. For a moment the bridge was silent except for the ship's hum and, far behind them, the soft noise of children breathing. Wind peeked around the corner, eyes bright with fear. "Bad people?" he asked through translator distortion. Marco wanted to lie. He wanted to say no one would come. Instead he crouched, looked at Wind, then at Sky standing behind him, and at Spark's hands wrapped around the oxygen bulb like a talisman. "Yes," Marco said. "Bad people will come. But we're moving." Lotta exhaled, then nodded once. "Where?" Marco opened a secure channel and pressed a name he hadn't spoken in years. The connection crackled. After a minute, a woman's face appeared, gray streaks in dark hair, eyes sharp, expression that had seen too many necessary decisions and refused to become numb. "This is Window," she said. "Who's on the line?" "Captain Marco Rudansky, Swallow," Marco replied. "I have 9 miners on board. The Commission wants them in a center. I don't." Window didn't look surprised. She looked attentive, like she was weighing not words, but a person. "You understand what you've done?" she asked. "Yes." "Then listen," Window said. "Lyra 6 won't be inspection. It'll be a public example. They'll make you a lesson. But there's another path." "What path?" "A free port in the Grey Horn system," Window said. "Formally under trade neutrality. In practice, it's a crack in their net. If you can reach it, we can keep your story from being sealed." Marco pulled up a map. Grey Horn lay a little off route, reachable but risky. Between them and the port stretched a patrol corridor where commission ships drifted like sharks. Lotta watched the screen. "Grey Horn," she muttered. "Sounds like trouble." Window's voice softened. "Trouble is already on your hull, Captain. The question is whether you let it crush you, or you use it to pry something open." Marco looked at the children through the bridge window, small silhouettes in a ship too big for them. Then he shifted the Swallow's course. On the third hour of their new vector, comms lit up again. This time it was not a commission official in a gray office. It was a military patrol voice, clipped and armed. Unregistered deviation detected. Freighter Swallow, state your cargo and purpose. Marco's hands were steady on the console. His pulse was not. Civilian supplies, he said. Emergency evacuation assistance. Your transponder flags custody objects, the voice replied. Stand by for boarding. Lada leaned in, eyes hard. They're close, she whispered. We won't outgun them. We don't need to, Marco murmured, and pulled up the debris belt Window had mentioned. An old battlefield's remains, dense enough to confuse scanners, dangerous enough to tear a ship open if flown wrong. Captain, Lada said, not angry now but afraid. If we go through that, one mistake. I know. A soft sound came from behind them. C stood in the corridor, palms pressed to the wall, head tilted as if listening to the ship's skin. Lissa followed, eyes wide. Spark clung to Sky's sleeve. Marco forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Back to the bay, he told them gently. Seat straps. Now. Sky looked at him through the translator's haze. They take? He asked. They want to, Marco said. But they won't. He didn't know if that was promise or prayer. The patrol voice repeated, Stand by for boarding. Marco answered by cutting the channel. Then he threw the Swallow into the debris belt. Metal rain appeared on radar as a slow storm. Fragments, panels, twisted ribs of ships that had once carried armies and now carried only silence. The belt did not look like a threat in the distance. It looked like the galaxy shrugging. Close up, it looked like teeth. Lada worked the shields manually. Her fingers flew, not because she wasn't scared, but because she refused to let fear steer. The Swallow's hull rang once as a shard glanced off. Hold it, Lada hissed. Hold it! Marco breathed through his teeth, eyes tracking vectors like he was threading a needle while falling. Behind them, the patrol ship's signature tried to follow, then stuttered, then blurred as the belt swallowed signals. For a moment, Marco thought they had made it. Then the warning siren wailed. A larger piece, an entire beam, rotated into their path, slow and inevitable. Marco yanked controls. The ship shuddered. The beam scraped their shield, light flaring like silent lightning, and the bridge filled with the smell of burnt insulation. Lada swore. Rear shield down 5%. Keep it, Marco said. Just keep it. And through the alarms he heard something else. A child's laugh. It was Spark. For one wild second she thought the shaking was a game. Marco's throat tightened with a feeling he could not name, something between terror and tenderness. He guided the Swallow deeper into the storm, because the storm was the only place the Commission could not board them. After the belt, the ship's systems quieted to a strained hum. The Swallow had bruises, scratches along the hull, a cracked sensor array, a shield coil that would complain for the rest of the trip. But it was alive. So were the children. Marco entered the nav module. The star map showed the corridor ahead, cleaner space, easier flight, and consequently, easier hunting. Lada stood with him, arms folded, grease on her cheek like war paint. They'll ping us as soon as we leave the belt, she said. I know, Marco replied. Window's voice echoed in his mind. If you reach Greyhorn, we can keep your story from being sealed. Marco zoomed in on a narrow passage, an old trade lane that had been abandoned after a border dispute. The lane was technically closed, officially uncharted, and therefore not a place the Commission wanted public attention. It was also their best chance. We take this, Marco said. Lada studied it. That's tight. It has to be, Marco answered. They expect us to run like criminals. We're going to run like cargo. Lada barked a short laugh. We are cargo. Marco didn't smile. Not them. A small presence hovered by the doorway. C watched the map, head tilted. Their fingers twitched against the wall as if feeling the ship's reaction to lines on a screen. Marco glanced at C. Do you understand? He asked, and knew the question was ridiculous. C didn't answer with words. They pressed their palm flat to the bulkhead. The ship's hum changed, subtly, like a person leaning closer to listen. One of the nav warning lights flickered, then steadied. Lada stared. Did the ship just respond? Marco felt the hair rise on his arms. Sai's eyes met his. For the first time, their expression looked less distant, almost intent. The translator beeped, surprised at its own output. Left, it said. Here. Empty. Marco looked at the map again and realized Sai was indicating a corridor within the closed lane, a gap in patrol coverage, a blind spot. Okay, Marco whispered. Okay, we go there. Lauda swallowed whatever comment she had and simply nodded, because in that moment she stopped seeing the children as cargo entirely. She saw them as crew. Marco found the children in the common bay, strapped into seats with blankets tucked tight. Lissa held onto the strap with white knuckles. Round's horns caught the light as he watched the door like he expected it to bite. Sky sat very still, eyes on Marco's face. Wind bounced one knee. Spark had somehow acquired a pen and was drawing circles on her glove. Marco sat on the floor so he wasn't towering over them. I need to tell you something, he said, and the translator tried its best to carry his voice across worlds. The people who call themselves the Custody Commission, they think you belong to them, Marco said. They want to take you to a center. Lissa's hands tightened. Round made a low, dangerous sound. Sky's gaze didn't move. Center. Door, he said. Yes, Marco admitted. Doors that lock. Silence swallowed the bay. Marco breathed in, then spoke the sentence he had been avoiding because speaking it made it real. I'm not taking you there. Wynn blinked. Not allowed, he said. I know, Marco replied. It's against their rule. So I'm breaking the rule. Spark stopped drawing. Her eyes widened. Lada leaned in the doorway, listening. Marco continued, voice steady even as his stomach churned. We're going to a place called Greyhorn. It's not perfect. It's not safe. But it's a place where we can ask for help. Where you can be seen as kids, not objects. Lissa leaned forward a fraction, as if pulled by the word kids. Round's shoulders loosened by 1 millimeter. Sai, sitting apart, pressed their fingertips to the metal floor. The translator beeped, then translated something like a feeling. Warm? It offered. Marco swallowed. I want it to be warm, he said. I can't promise everything, but I can promise this. I won't give you to people who call you property. Sky studied Marco with that unnervingly adult patience. Then Sky said slowly, through the translator, Home. We're not close. Marco's throat tightened. Yes, he whispered. Home is where they don't lock you in. Spark reached out and for the first time touched Marco's sleeve. A tiny touch. A question. A vote. Marco covered her hand gently with his own. Outside the bay, the ship's engines deepened their hum. They were committed now. Not to a route, to a sentence. The commission did not like when someone changed trajectory. As soon as they left the debris belt and entered cleaner space, the Swallow's sensors caught a new signal. A sharp, controlled ping that meant one thing. Tracking. Lada watched the screen. They've got a tracer in our wake, she said. Probably launched a drone while we were blind. Can we shake it? Marco asked. Lada's mouth twisted. We can try. She rerouted power, bled heat, killed non-essential lights. The Swallow became darker, quieter, a whispering ship. Marco flew at the edge of legal lanes close to gravity wells that could smear signatures. The tracer kept coming. Window called on a secure channel. Commission drones, she said without preamble. They'll box you in before Greyhorn if they can. You need something louder than running. Like what? Marco asked. Truth, Window said. Do you have proof? Logs? Anything from Gerda 9? Anything that shows what the centers are? Marco looked at Lada. Lada's eyes went to the cargo bay. 6 empty capsules now stacked like ghosts. We have the pods, Lada said. We have their seals. And we have the guard, Marco added. And Gerda 9's power logs. Window's voice tightened. Good. Get to Greyhorn. We'll make noise. Marco cut the channel and exhaled. Behind him, in the common bay, Spark was humming a tune she did not know she knew. Wind was watching the stars. Lissa traced the seam of her blanket with a finger like she was learning the concept of ownership. Round sat, fists clenched, but no longer shaking. She listened to the ship's bones. Marco thought, how can anyone call this property? The tracer pinged again, closer. Lada nodded toward the closed lane ahead. Sees corridor, she murmured. If it's real, it's now. Marco angled the ship into the narrow passage. Space there felt different, quieter, heavier. The stars seemed farther away. Sensor noise dipped. For a minute, the tracer's ping faltered. Then it vanished. Lada let out a breath like she had been holding her lungs since Gerda 9. Marco didn't celebrate. He knew better than to trust silence. But for the first time since he broke the rule, he allowed himself a thought that wasn't fear. Maybe they could make it. The drift field welcomed them like a memory. Greyhorn's system was rimmed with old wreckage, trade barges, mining rigs, half-disassembled hulls, scraps collected over decades. Not a battlefield this time, but the skeleton of commerce, the leftovers of survival. On radar, it looked like slow, gentle snowfall. In reality, it was a labyrinth. The Swallow slid between chunks of metal, passing close enough that Marco could read faded registry numbers on broken plates. Lada kept her hands on manual thrusters, lips moving as she counted distances like prayers. Spark pressed her face to the porthole. Stars. Broken, she whispered, translator muddling it into poetry. Wind asked, why here? Because nobody owns it, Lada said, surprising Marco with how tender her voice sounded. A warning flashed. Micro-impact zone. Marco corrected course. A flake of metal struck the hull and skittered away, harmless, like a pebble tossed at a window. They reached the end of the drift field and the nav display cleared. Ahead, a cluster of lights. The free port. Greyhorn did not look like the shining cities and recruitment posters. It looked like a patched jacket. Modules bolted together by necessity, docking arms wrapped in different colors of repair foam, old hull plates welded into new shapes. Holographic ads flickered on its sides. Food, repairs, cheap oxygen, trying to make poverty look like choice. Marco hailed the port. A voice answered immediately, not official but alert. Unknown vessel. Identify. Freighter Swallow, Marco said. Civilian. Request docking. Medical priority. Miners aboard. There was a pause. Then the voice returned, warmer. Greyhorn doesn't like children arriving as cargo, it said. Dock to Sector 3. Medics are coming. Lada's shoulders sagged a fraction. Marco realized she had been bracing for someone to refuse them. They docked. The airlock opened to a corridor that smelled like oil and spices and old metal. Port medics arrived in mismatched uniforms, eyes sharp, hands gentle. They took one look at the children and stopped asking questions about paperwork. They asked instead, are you hurt? Can you breathe? Do you want water? Spark stared at the medic's offered cup like it was a miracle. Lissa clutched Marco's sleeve as medics guided her forward, then let go slowly, like practicing trust. Round kept his horns angled defensively until a medic offered him a glove that fit his hand. The child stared at it, confused, then slid it on like armor. She walked through the corridor and paused, fingertips brushing a wall panel. The lights above flickered, then steadied, as if greeting an old friend. Marco watched, and for the first time in days his chest loosened. Then Window's message came again. Urgent. They're coming, she said. Commission ship. 2 hours. Marco looked at Greyhorn's patched walls and thought, this place is a crack. Cracks don't like pressure. Lada met his eyes. We're not safe yet, she said. No, Marco agreed. But we're not alone now. They brought the children into a small quarantine suite on Greyhorn, clean by port standards, warm by Marco's. The medics ran scans, fed them broth, checked lungs and blood and whatever passed for it across species. They spoke gently. They never said, object. Marco sat in a hallway, back against metal, watching through a glass panel. For the first time since Gerda 9, he wasn't moving, and the stillness made the fear louder. Window arrived in person an hour later. She moved like someone used to slipping through borders. You made it, she said, and the relief in her voice sounded like anger finally releasing its grip. Marco stood. Barely. Window looked past him at the children. 9, she said. They'll call you a thief for that. Marco's mouth twisted. Let them. Window's eyes sharpened. We need evidence, not feelings. Feelings are easy to dismiss. Lotta stepped up, holding a data stick. We pulled logs from Gerda 9, she said, and from the capsules. We also recorded the Commission's responses on comm. Window took the stick like it was a weapon. Good. There's a doctor here who can read it fast. He used to work Commission Medical. Why would he help? Marco asked. Because he didn't like turning children into reports, Window replied. They met Dr. Said Abbas in a lab that smelled of alcohol and solder. He was a thin man with tired eyes, hands steady as he connected the data stick to a reader. I promised myself I'd stop, he said quietly. Then you arrived. The files loaded. Hundreds of logs, timestamps, sedation cycles, restraint parameters, notes written in the dry language of compliance. Object agitation reduced. Cultural response suppressed. Memory interventions applied. Said's jaw tightened. These are not temporary placements, he said. These are conditioning programs. Marco felt cold flood his stomach. To make them... what? Acceptable, Sayed said. Quiet. Easy. A form of erasure that leaves the body alive so the paperwork stays clean. Lotta's hands curled into fists. So the directive was never about culture. It was about control, Sayed said. If humans adopt them, humans will talk. Humans will show faces. It becomes harder to hide what the centers do. Window leaned over the screen. Can we prove it publicly? Sayed looked up, eyes suddenly fierce. Yes. Marco heard from behind the lab door a soft sound. Lissa laughing at something Spark did. A quiet bell of a laugh, shaky, but real. Sayed's voice lowered. If you tell the galaxy what's in these files, the Commission will come for you, not just legally. Marco met Window's gaze. They're coming anyway. Window nodded once. Then, she said, we scream first. And the first scream they made was not with a voice, but with a signal. Window had channels, not official ones. The ones that existed because there were always people who couldn't walk past suffering and pretend it was policy. She sent the evidence packet to independent reporters, to neutral jurists, to civic networks, to any archive that couldn't be deleted with one order. She tagged it with one line. Directive 77 GCC. What temporary means. Greyhorn's station lights flickered as if the port itself held its breath. Within minutes, replies arrived. Confirm authenticity. Send more. This is illegal. This is true? Window's mouth was a hard line. Now we wait for the Commission's answer, she said. They didn't wait long. 2 hours after arrival, a Commission cruiser appeared beyond the drift field. It moved with the quiet confidence of authority. Not fast, not nervous, certain it owned the space it entered. Greyhorn's dockmaster answered the hail with a bored voice. Greyhorn is a neutral trade port, he said. State your business. The Commission voice was smooth as glass. We are retrieving stolen custody objects and detaining a criminal vessel. Open your docks. Greyhorn's dockmaster yawned audibly. We don't like retrievals that involve children screaming in our corridors. These are not children under your jurisdiction, the Commission voice snapped. They are under my ears, the dockmaster replied, and my docks are closed. Window exhaled. They'll try force, she murmured. Lotta glanced at the patched walls. Can Greyhorn fight? Window's smile was razor thin. Greyhorn doesn't fight like a navy. It fights like a street that refuses to move. Outside, port defense arrays, old, mismatched, shifted into aim. Not enough to win a war. Enough to make a cruiser consider optics. Marco watched the cruiser hover. He felt the weight of the galaxy's gaze turning toward them, not as heroes, but as a problem. A door hissed open behind them. A woman stepped in. Short hair, a suit that said, law, even in a free port. Eyes too bright for how tired her face looked. Oksana Hrin, she said, offering her hand to Marco. Window told me you'd need a lawyer. Marco blinked. You came fast. I have a bad habit of running toward fires, Oksana said, and the Commission just lit one where children are. She looked at the data on the screen, at the logs, at the commission cruiser outside, and her lips curled. "They'll charge you with theft," she said. "Obstruction, endangerment, interference with interspecies custody." "Sounds heavy," Lada muttered. Oksana nodded. "It is. But we have something heavier." She tapped the evidence packet. "Truth," she said, "and witnesses who are still alive." Marco's chest tightened. "They're kids." "Kids can speak," Oksana replied, softer now. "Especially when adults have been speaking over them for years." Outside, the cruiser hailed again, voice colder. "Grey Horn," it said. "You are harboring a violator and illegally holding custody objects. Open your docks for inspection." Grey Horn's dockmaster answered with a sigh. "Inspection requests go through arbitration," he said. "If you want to make noise, do it in front of the council." There was a pause. Then finally, the commission voice said, "A hearing will be requested." Window's eyes narrowed. "They're confident," she whispered. Oksana shrugged. "They're used to winning in quiet rooms." Marco watched Spark asleep on a medcot, small hand curled around the oxygen bulb like it was a promise. "We won't give them a quiet room," Marco said. Oksana smiled, not kindly. "Good. Let's give them a hall." The hearing was set for the third day. An emergency session, fast by council standards, which meant only slightly slower than a meteor. The council station, Arbitria, was neutral, gleaming, and always cold. It floated between jurisdictions like a polished coin, the place where words became law. While they waited, Grey Horn buzzed with tension. Reports about the leaked evidence spread. Some networks called it propaganda. Some called it betrayal. Some simply showed the log screenshots and let people decide. The commission issued a statement. Fabricated data, extremist manipulation, dangerous human interference. Oksana read it aloud and snorted. "Even here their language betrays them," she said. "They cannot say children without putting quotes around it." Said Abbas prepared technical authentication. Window organized witnesses. Grey Horn's dockmaster fortified his neutrality with sarcasm and locked doors. Marco spent most of those days with the children, not because he thought his presence solved anything, but because every time he looked at them he remembered why he had broken the rule. Spark learned the port's layout in an hour. She followed mechanics, asked questions with her eyes, touched every panel. At one point she pressed her fingers to a power conduit and the lights brightened slightly, as if she had coaxed the station to breathe. Wind discovered a small vent that blew warm air and sat in front of it like it was a campfire. Sky asked Oksana, in broken translated phrases, "Do they close?" Oksana crouched, met Sky's eyes. "Not if we can help it," she said. Lissa practiced laughing. The sound was quiet, a bell behind glass. But each time it came, it made Marco's throat tighten. Round stopped growling at every adult and started watching instead, learning, deciding. She wandered the port and listened to its systems like music. The port technicians stared, unnerved, as lights flickered into stability after C passed. "Who are you?" one mechanic whispered. C didn't answer. They touched the wall. The hum smoothed. It was answer enough. Marco didn't know what would happen on Arbitria. He didn't know if the council would care about children over politics. But he knew something else now. Something the directive had never considered. When a child learns that doors can stay open, you can't lock them again without the whole port hearing the slam. They left for Arbitria in a convoy. Grey Horn demanded formal escort for safety, which was a polite way of saying, if the commission tries to seize them, it will do it under witnesses. The commission cruiser did not board. It shadowed them, sleek and silent, like judgment. On paper, the flight was logistics. In life, it was a shield. The Swallow flew with Grey Horn ships on its flank. Small traders, salvage tugs, patchwork vessels that had no business escorting anyone. Except they did, because they had chosen to. Marco stood on the bridge and watched Arbitria grow in the viewport. A bright ring of light, immaculate, indifferent. Spark pressed her face to the glass. "Big," she said. Wind whispered. "Cold." Sky said nothing. He held Lissa's hand, and that was a sentence. Oksana adjusted her collar as if preparing for battle. Remember, she told Marco, you are not on trial for being kind. You are on trial for making kindness visible. Marco's mouth twisted. That sounds like a bad universe. It's the one we have, Oksana replied. So we change it. Said Abbas carried a case of data drives like it contained not logs, but ammunition. Window stared at the commission cruiser with a gaze that could cut metal. As they docked at Arbitria, security was already waiting. Council neutral guards, commission delegates, media drones hovering like insects. The children flinched at the brightness. Lada moved closer, her body unconsciously forming a barrier. Marco felt anger rise. Not hot, but heavy. The kind that makes your bones rigid. He remembered Gerda 9's dark corridor, the capsules in a line, the tapping fingers. He walked forward anyway because backing up was no longer an option. The hearing hall on Arbitria was built for spectacle. High ceiling, transparent barriers, lights angled to make faces readable for the recordings. Council judges sat on a raised platform, robes neutral, expressions trained into balanced. Delegates filled rows behind them, species-coded colors, badges, quiet hostility. The commission's advocate stood first. She spoke with practiced calm. Captain Marco Rudansky, she said, committed theft of commission custody objects, obstructed lawful guardianship, endangered minors by unauthorized transport, and disseminated fabricated data to destabilize interspecies relations. The words were heavy, designed to crush. Marco stood and felt Lada's hand briefly touch his elbow. Anchor, not comfort. Oksana rose. Her voice was clear, sharp as clean glass. My client saved 9 minors from a station failure. He provided medical aid. He prevented death. The commission calls this theft because the commission chose to label children objects. Murmurs rippled. The judge raised a hand. Order, Oksana continued. We will show evidence that Directive 77 GCC has been enforced in a way that violates the Council's own child rights statute. We will show logs from Gerda 9 and from commission equipment indicating prolonged sedation, restraint, and memory intervention under the term temporary placement. The commission advocate smiled faintly. Fabrication, said Abbas stepped forward. I worked commission medical, he said. I recognize these codes. I recognize these signatures. This is real. The commission advocate's eyes narrowed. You are disgraced. I am tired, said replied. There's a difference. Windows submitted authentication from multiple independent archives because they had learned long ago that truth needs redundancy. The judges listened. Their faces did not change, but Marco saw something in the way one of them blinked too slowly. Then the commission advocate did what authorities do when logic begins to slip. She shifted to fear. If humans are allowed to adopt alien minors, she said, voice rising, the galaxy risks cultural dissolution. Species identities will be erased. This is assimilation through sentiment. Oksana tilted her head. And keeping children in sealed centers is preservation? The advocate's lips tightened. It is stability. Oksana spread her hands. Then let's ask the ones you call objects what stability feels like. The hall went quiet. Even the drones seemed to hover more carefully. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Witness testimony will be permitted, she said, with translation safeguards. Marco's pulse hammered. He looked back at the children sitting behind a barrier, small in a room too large, eyes bright with fear, hands gripping each other like ropes. Oksana's voice softened as she addressed them. You can speak, she said, only if you want. No one here can punish you for your words. Marco wished he believed that, but he had already broken one rule. Maybe today, they would break another. The rule that children stay silent. Lissa stood first. She moved slowly, as if every step was a memory of restraints. She approached the translation unit, placed her palm on it like she had on Marco's sleeve, and looked up at the judges. The translator beeped, then produced her words with gentle distortion. In capsule. No day, it said. Only light. No door. No voice. When cry, sleep make. Oksana asked softly. They sedated you when you cried? Lissa nodded. The translator rendered it. Tears. Quiet. A shiver ran through the hall. Round stood next. He stared at the commission advocate like he wanted to bite her words. The translator struggled, then gave something like this. They call me object. They take name. They put number. They say, for my good. Round lifted his chin. His horns caught the light. I am not number, the translator said. And for the first time the device sounded angry. Wind stood, nervous energy trembling in his legs. He spoke fast. The translator turned it into fragments. Door close. Air thin. I think. I vanish. Then captain come. He say you. Not it. Spark didn't want to stand. She clung to Sky's sleeve, eyes wide at the sea of faces. Sky squeezed her hand, then rose. He did not speak much. He only said one sentence, slow and clear. Home is where they don't lock you. The translator delivered it cleanly. Silence hit the hall like gravity. Then C moved. Not quickly. Not nervously. With the calm of someone walking inside a current. Sai approached the wall panel beside the witness stand and placed both palms on it. A low hum rose from Arbitria's systems. Lights along the hall flickered once, then stabilized into a warmer tone, as if the station itself leaned in to listen. The delegates gasped. The judge lifted a hand. What are they doing? Said Abbas whispered, stunned. They're interfacing. C did not speak words, but the panel lit up under their fingers. A waveform appeared on the display. Arbitria's internal resonance map. Then another wave, different, layered on top. The translator beeped, confused, then certain. Listen, it said. And then the hall heard it. A recorded sound, the tapping from inside a capsule. A small rhythm. Human ears would have missed it as static, but through C's contact, the station amplified it, translated it into something unmistakable. A child knocking on glass. Knock, knock, knock. The hall held its breath. The judge's face finally changed, not into pity, into recognition, because everyone in that room, no matter their species, understood the meaning of a small hand knocking from behind a sealed door. The council recessed for deliberation. Waiting became the hardest part. Outside the hall, in a quiet corridor, Marco leaned against a wall and felt the delayed shaking in his hands. Lada offered him water. Oksana paced like a wolf in a suit. Said Abbas sat, eyes closed, as if praying to nothing. Window checked her comm feed. The story is everywhere now, she murmured. They can't seal it. But they can punish us, Marco said. They can try, Window answered. Spark slept in Marco's jacket on a bench. Wind lay beside her, one hand on the fabric like an anchor. Lissa watched the corridor, alert. Round sat with arms crossed, horns angled defensively. Sky stared at the ceiling lights as if memorizing what open looked like. C listened to the building. Marco thought of the commission advocate's words, stability, culture, risk. He thought of the logs, sedation cycles, memory interventions. He thought of the simple sentence Sky had spoken. Home is where they don't lock you. He realized the fight was no longer about adoption. It was about whether the galaxy believed children were people. After what felt like hours, the hearing hall doors opened. A neutral guard called, "All parties return." Marco rose, heart pounding, and walked back into the light. The judges returned to their seats. The hall quieted, hungry for a verdict. The chief judge spoke. Directive 77 GCC was enacted to prevent coercive assimilation, she said. However, evidence presented indicates systemic harm occurring under its enforcement. This council recognizes that stability cannot be built on sealed doors. The commission advocate's jaw tightened. The judge continued. Effective immediately. Custody centers under commission oversight will be subject to independent inspection. All minors held beyond 30 standard days without verified repatriation plan will be reviewed. Memory intervention practices are suspended pending inquiry. Gasps. Murmurs. The commission advocate opened her mouth to protest, but the judge raised a hand. And, the judge said, voice firm, human adoption petitions will be reinstated under cross-species consent protocols. The minor's welfare and expressed preference will be considered primary, not secondary. Marco's knees felt weak. Lada's breath hitched. Oksana's eyes closed for a moment, and when she opened them, they were wet. The judge looked at Marco. "Captain Rudansky," she said, "your deviation from route violated procedure. But procedure is not law when law fails, children. You will receive a censure, not imprisonment." The commission advocate's face hardened with fury. This is the council," the judge cut in, "and the council has heard knocking." Marco swallowed, unable to speak. The judge's gaze shifted to the children. "You are not objects," she said, and the words were simple enough that no translator struggled. "You are minors with rights. You will not return to custody centers under sealed protocols." Spark woke, eyes blinking. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood the tone. Wind looked at Marco. "Door open?" he asked. Marco managed a shaky smile. "Yes," he whispered. "Open." The hall, for a heartbeat, felt less like a courtroom and more like a place where the galaxy remembered how to be alive. After the verdict, there were still many things. Interviews, checks, signatures, official forms that tried to catch up with what had already happened in human hearts. The commission retreated, but not quietly. They promised appeals. They promised consequences. They promised, in their language, continued stability measures. Greyhorn's dockmaster sent a message to Arbitria's media feed. A single line. Stability shouldn't require locks. It went viral faster than any official statement. Marco returned to the Swallow not as a freight runner, but as temporary guardian under council review. The phrase sounded dry, but inside it lived the word guardian and the word family. The children began, slowly, to learn what it meant when doors didn't close behind you. When someone asked, "How are you?" and it didn't mean, "Are you broken yet?" Spark one day brought Marco a small piece of metal she had found in Greyhorn's docks and shoved it into his pocket. The translator chimed, "Warm. Yours?" Marco didn't know if it was a gift or a charm. He just squeezed her tiny hand. Lissa learned to laugh, quiet as a bell. Round stopped growling and started listening. Sky stopped looking at every ceiling light like it might shut off forever. Wind found a vent in the Swallow's hallway and declared it his personal sun. She stayed quiet, but sometimes, when the ship's systems groaned, she pressed a palm to the wall and the hum smoothed, as if the ship relaxed under a child's touch. One evening, Lada sat with Marco on the Swallow's ramp, legs dangling above the dock, watching port lights flicker like grounded stars. "You know what's funny?" she said. "What?" Marco asked. "You broke a rule to save 9 kids, Lada said, "and it turns out you gave thousands a chance." Marco let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "I'm not a hero," he said. "I didn't say you were," Lada replied. "You just didn't walk past." Marco looked at the children through the open hatch, small shapes in a ship that now felt like home. He realized, not walking past is a kind of courage the galaxy doesn't know how to legislate. Epilogue. 6 months later, a human orbital colony opened a new building. The sign above the entrance was simple, the kind that didn't need translation. It didn't carry a slogan, didn't sell a policy. It said, in 1,000 scripts and one meaning, welcome. The building wasn't a center, it wasn't a cage, it was a community house. Half clinic, half school, half living room for anyone who had once been called temporary. Marco sometimes docked the Swallow there. His ship now carried a small symbol painted near the hatch, a crooked line that looked like an open window drawn by Spark with a seriousness that made it official. Children from different species came and went, some settling with human families, some returning to their own communities, but no longer as objects, no longer as blank forms. They left with names that belonged to them. Lissa chose a family that spoke her dialect with an accent and tried anyway. Round joined a mixed crew on a trade barge because he liked motion and hated cages. Wind adopted a habit of collecting vents and calling them suns. Spark became a terror to every technician she met because she asked why, like it was a screwdriver. She spent a while traveling with engineers, smiling faintly whenever a system hummed in harmony. Sky, who had once said his real name was like the sky and impossible for Marco's tongue, eventually received a document that confirmed his chosen name officially. Stamped, signed, not a number. The day he held it, he stared at the paper like it might vanish. Then he looked at Marco and said, through the translator, clear and calm, "Home is where they don't lock you. You gave us that." Marco lifted his eyes to the stars, which had always been indifferent to laws. "No," he said softly. "You gave it to me. Because when you see a child's fingers tapping on capsule glass, you either turn away or you break the rule." He broke it, and light came in through the crack.